I can get to where I can see the folks out here a little bit. I'm not pretending to part the waters now. We can part a few folks from time to time. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Randy, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was very impressed with all the people you said had been here. And then when you mentioned Rusty Wallace, I was really impressed. I know a little bit about racing myself, or watching it anyway, and I think y'all going to be NASCAR here one of these days before long. And I grew up around a little dirt track there in a little town in Lawrence County, Tennessee, back in the old days, and been a fan ever since. So congratulations on that. I'm delighted to be here with my wife Jerry today. We were able to celebrate her birthday yesterday in Des Moines, so that'll be a birthday she won't forget. And Saturday night we got to shake, I guess, 800 hands at the Christian Alliance Dinner. More fried chicken I've ever seen in my life, and I thought I'd seen some fried chicken. But we had a great night there. We've got a couple of little kids. The Lord has blessed us in many ways, certainly me, early in my life and a little later in my life, and two of those, the main two, frankly, back in the hotel now waiting on us. And our little girl Hayden, I'm going to be a little more careful about where I take her, because the other day we were getting ready to do another speech, you know, she was going on, and she looked at me and honest truth, she said, "Papa, is this going to be boring again?" And I told my first political lie to my own little girl at that particular time. But anyway, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you dropping by here today and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I've had an opportunity to see my country from a lot of different vantage points over the years. Randy mentioned some of them. I started out in a little town in southern Middle Tennessee, and working as a local bicycle plant there. And one morning about 2 a.m., when I was up to my ankles in water, running machinery, it occurred to me, working the graveyard shift, it occurred to me maybe I ought to get a little bit more education. And I did that, and I was able to be a prosecutor and a Watergate lawyer and all that by the age of 30, and serve in the United States Senate, and from that see a large part of the world. But I learned, I guess, what a lot of people learn when they hopefully get a little bit more wisdom and put things in a little more perspective. That the most important things in your life happen under your own roof. And that has to do with the lessons Jerry and I have had. Jerry and I were talking the other day, and she reminded me that she was born in Hastings, Nebraska, pretty much grew up with her grandmother in Clay Center, and mentioned a lake by the name, I think, of Lake Okoboji, where she spent so much time as a kid. I said, "You're coming to Iowa with me." I said, "For sure." We began to ask ourselves, what kind of world these kids are going to grow up in? And thinking more about the future. And I began to ask myself, what was my highest and best use? What could I do? I've been able to step up a time or two in my country's history, in my state's history, and do some things that I hopefully will be beneficial to them. And how many people have the opportunity in trying times to make a difference in the course of their country's future and do something a little better than maybe they had done before, and a little bit more? I really think in many ways our country's at a crossroads. We're going to have the opportunity to continue on the great American tradition that our founding fathers established a long time ago and become more secure and more prosperous and more united as a people as we go forward. Well, we can go down the road of bigger government, higher taxes to sustain that government, more regulation, and more spending of money that we don't have. That will undermine our prosperity. It'll undermine our security. I'm determined that we don't go down that road. And the two things that we've got to do most at hand is to stay with our principles, the ones that have worked for us not only as a party, but for the benefit of our nation. And secondly, nominate someone who is a common sense conservative who can win next November. They won't surprise you. It won't surprise you to know that I got a few ideas about who that might be. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm reminded a little bit of 1994. I was doing some interesting things back then, enjoying myself. I had accidentally got into the movie business a little bit, along with my law practice. They made a movie about a case that I had. I took on the governor of Tennessee, and I wound up playing myself in the movie. And sometimes when they want somebody that looked mean and would work cheap, they'd call me. I'd go to wherever it was that they wanted to do one, while I was still practicing law, which is the only thing I ever wanted to do when I was a young man. But I got to thinking about conversations that we had around our kitchen table when I was growing up. I got to thinking about when I read how I felt when I first read Barry Goldwater's Conscience of a Conservative back at Memphis State, they called it then, in Tennessee. And I got to thinking that it was time for me to step up. Not as a professional politician. I never intended to do that. I put term limits on myself. I abided by those term limits. I went in and did my best. And when the time was up, I left. But on the campaign trail, I remember we were talking about first principles, the principles on which this nation was founded, the ones that came down and gave us the Declaration of Independence, which reminds us that our basic rights come from God and not from government. The Constitution of the United States, which showed us that divided power was best for the freedom and liberty of people. Not only divided at the federal level, between the federal and the state levels, called principles of federalism, based on the notion that all answers don't emanate from Washington, D.C. To generate liberty, freedom for our people, individual freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, and the fact that those things all go together and are intertwined. That led us to the positions we took out on the campaign trail. Respect for the rule of law, strong national security, the importance of the sanctity of life, competition, again, freedom, human nature, being allowed to do the good things that it can do when properly inspired, free trade, commerce with ourselves, and free trade with other nations always has led to prosperity and towards more freedom. Back when we started this thing, back in the foundings of our country, and on up until about the 1900s, depending on how you define it, we were about the only democracy there was out there. And now, because of our force in the world of stability and the influence we have had in encouraging other people to go toward democracy, we know more than half the countries now fulfill that category. It makes for a more peaceful world, makes for a better world, and it provides a framework for us to do what has worked for us and making us the most prosperous nation in the world and the most powerful, but also as an inspiration to all those who would choose to follow that path. And they've had the same results when they've tried it. We didn't realize it at the time in '94, but we were actually a part of a revolution that was going on. Clinton had kicked us pretty good a couple of years before. We were kind of down as a party. A lot of people saying we couldn't win in '94, and the pendulum was against us, and the momentum was against us, and so forth. But come to find out, by sticking with those rules, I and people like me, who are running for office across the country, who started out, many like I did, way behind, and name ID down, and things of that nature, we found a receptive audience with the only people that count, and that is the American people who decide these issues. And because they answered the way they did on election day, we were able to go to Washington and do things like balance the budget, cut taxes, and reform welfare, something that we've been talking about and trying to do for 30 years. Wasn't working for anybody, but still it was around there. I was able to compile a 100% pro-life voting record while I was there, which I'm proud of.